James sat in his car, the engine idling, windshield wipers dragging lazily across a pane smeared with city grime and rain. It wasn't just the weather that weighed on him, it was everything. The silence in the cabin was suffocating, broken only by the dull ticking of the dashboard clock. 8:42 a.m. He should have been inside 10 minutes ago, at his desk, pretending like everything was fine. But it wasn't. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. 3 clients lost in 2 months. A promotion he'd worked for passed over without so much as a conversation. The same boss who once praised his relentless drive now couldn't look him in the eye. The words he overheard last week still echoed in his mind. Maybe he's not built for this. Talented, sure, but no grit. He had grit, or at least he thought he did. Where had it gone? A notification buzzed on his phone. Calendar reminder. Team huddle. 9:00 a.m. He tapped it away without looking. The idea of walking in there, past the stares, the polite smiles, the questions, "You okay, James?" made his stomach churn. He felt like a ghost haunting his own life. His fingers trembled as he reached for the coffee cup in the console. Cold. He hadn't even taken a sip. What scared him wasn't the failure. It was how numb he was becoming to it. He used to care, deeply. Now he just floated, going through the motions, answering emails like a robot, nodding through meetings, laughing at jokes he didn't hear. It was as if someone had reached into his chest and dialed the volume on his passion all the way down to mute. In a rare moment of rawness, James said aloud, "What the hell happened to me?" His voice sounded foreign, cracked, hollow. The thought of quitting crept in again, familiar now, like an old friend offering escape. Maybe he'd take a week off, or a month, maybe just vanish for a while. Would anyone really notice? He opened the glove box and stared blankly at the mess of receipts, napkins, and spare pens. Buried beneath it all was a photo, him and his dad, 10 years ago. James was grinning, holding up a small trophy from a college business competition. His dad's hand was clapped on his shoulder, proud, eyes bright. That kid in the photo would have laughed at this moment. The kid who believed anything was possible, who didn't flinch from pressure, who wanted the hard path. "Where did you go?" James whispered to the younger version of himself. He didn't have the answer. All he had was a ticking clock, a rain-soaked city, and a creeping sense that something needed to change, or he was going to lose himself for good. With a sigh that felt like surrender, he turned off the engine and stepped out into the storm, unaware that before the day ended, one stranger and one simple quote would change everything. The rain hadn't let up by lunchtime. It had turned the streets into rivers and people into shadows under umbrellas. James, having sleepwalked through his meetings, skipped the office cafeteria and wandered aimlessly into a diner 3 blocks away. One of those old, quiet places with a chipped counter, cracked leather booths, and a jukebox that hadn't worked since the 80s. The kind of place people forgot existed, like him. He took a seat by the window. No one greeted him. He didn't expect them to. A waitress finally strolled over, placed a glass of water without a word, and scribbled on her pad. "Just coffee," James said. She walked away without a nod. James looked around. A couple of older men at the far end were arguing over a chessboard. A mother with a crying toddler tried in vain to get ketchup out of a crusty bottle. And then there was the man sitting alone at the counter. He had white hair tied back into a loose knot, a wrinkled sports coat, and a face like time had tried to erase him, but gave up halfway. He was writing in a worn leather notebook, pausing between sentences as if he was debating with the paper itself. The man noticed James looking and gave a slight nod. James nodded back. The coffee came, and James sipped it. It was terrible, scalding and bitter, but somehow better than the silence. He took out his phone to scroll, but the battery had died. "Of course. You look like you've got a mountain sitting on your back," the old man said suddenly, not looking up from his notebook. James blinked. He wasn't even sure the guy had been watching him. "Just work," James muttered. "It's always just work," the man replied, setting his pen down and turning toward him. "Until one day it's your whole damn life." James gave a weak smile. "You're not wrong." The man studied him for a moment, then reached into his coat, pulled out a clean napkin, and scribbled something with his pen. He folded it once, then slid it across the counter without a word. Their eyes met, and in the old man's gaze, there was no pity, just recognition. James picked up the napkin and read the words. "You already have what it takes. You just forgot who you are." He stared at it. Simple, direct, but something about it hit him harder than the cold rain outside. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything. When he looked up again, the man had gone, vanished like smoke. No sign he'd even paid. James folded the napkin and slipped it into his pocket, the corners damp from his fingertips. He didn't understand why it mattered. It was just a quote, just ink on a napkin. But it felt like someone had thrown him a rope in the middle of a storm, and for the first time in weeks, he tightened his grip. The napkin sat on James's nightstand like a quiet dare. He had reread it 5 times that evening, each time unsure why it pulled at him. It wasn't like he hadn't heard motivational quotes before. His office walls were covered with cheesy posters. "Push harder. Success is earned. Hustle never sleeps." None of them had done a damn thing for him. But this one felt different. Maybe because it didn't scream. It whispered, "You already have what it takes. You just forgot who you are." Lying in bed with the city humming outside his window, James couldn't stop thinking about it. Who was he, really? Not this washed-out version dragging himself through days. He remembered the college years, the fire in his chest, the ambition so fierce it kept him up at night. Back then, nothing felt impossible. What had changed? He stared at the ceiling. His room was a mess. Laundry in a pile, dishes stacked on the desk, old takeout boxes sitting like trophies to apathy. He used to care. He used to fight. But lately, even brushing his teeth felt like a chore. He sat up. No plan, no grand vision, just one small thing. That's all he could promise himself. James grabbed a notepad from the drawer and wrote, "Wake up at 6:30. Make bed. Clean desk. Finish draft of sales pitch. Call Dad back." It wasn't a battle plan. More like a list of tiny rebellions, a way to prove, even if only to himself, that he still had a pulse, that he wasn't done yet. The next morning, the alarm hit him like a punch. 6:30 a.m. felt like punishment. He sat on the edge of the bed, blinking blearily. The napkin peeked at him from the nightstand. He reached for it, read it again, and whispered, "Just one thing." He made his bed. It was sloppy, but it was made. He cleaned his desk. He opened his laptop, and surprisingly, didn't dread it. By 9:00 a.m., he had a working draft of the pitch he'd been avoiding for 2 weeks. At lunch, he called his dad. They hadn't spoken in a month. "Hey," James said. "Hey, son," his dad replied. "Everything okay?" "No," James said, "but I think it might be." That night, as James brushed his teeth and looked into the mirror, he didn't see a success story. But he saw someone who had shown up, someone who had pushed back, even just a little, against the tide. And sometimes that's all it takes. He folded the napkin carefully and slid it into his wallet, its new home. Not just as a quote, but as a reminder that the first war is always against inertia. And today, he had won a small one. Tomorrow, he'd fight again. By the end of the second week, James was beginning to believe in momentum. The little things had added up. His desk was clean, his calendar organized, and his inbox under control. He started arriving to work 10 minutes early, not because anyone asked him to, but because it felt right. He felt sharper, focused, in control. People were starting to notice. "New haircut. You're glowing. Man, whatever you're doing, keep it up." It wasn't a haircut. It was discipline. For the first time in a long while, James walked into the weekly strategy meeting with confidence. His pitch, the same one he had spent 3 late nights refining, was solid. He had practiced it. He believed in it. But halfway through his presentation, things went sideways. "Wait, wait, wait," interrupted Mark, the senior project manager, waving a hand dismissively. "Where are you getting these numbers? They're completely off compared to our key 3 data." James froze. He looked at the slide again, then realized the formula in his spreadsheet had pulled from the wrong dataset. A rookie mistake. I can double-check that," James stammered, throat tightening. "Double-check?" Mark scoffed. "You should have checked it the first time. This is the second time this quarter we've had sloppy data from you." A few chuckles broke out. One person whispered. His manager didn't even look up. James finished the pitch, but no one was listening. He felt like he was underwater. The meeting moved on without him. By the time he got back to his desk, he felt the familiar ache, the old weight of failure settling onto his shoulders like a shroud. He stared at his screen, jaw clenched, fingers curled tightly into fists. You had one job. You finally get a shot, and you blow it. The voice in his head was merciless. This was why he never moved up. This was why people passed him over. It wasn't bad luck. It was him. He reached for his jacket. Maybe he'd leave. Take a walk. Maybe not come back. Then his hand brushed against his wallet. The napkin. He pulled it out, carefully, like it was made of glass. He unfolded it. The ink was slightly faded, the edges frayed. You already have what it takes. You just forgot who you are. James stared at it for a long time. He had 2 choices, crumble or correct, escape or engage. His heartbeat slowed. He opened his spreadsheet, found the error, and corrected it. Then he rewrote the entire pitch deck. Data, graphs, footnotes, everything. He fact-checked every line. He stayed after work, alone in the quiet office. When he finished, he sent a revised version with a short note, updated with corrected figures. My mistake. Won't happen again. He didn't beg. He didn't explain. He just owned it. And as he packed up to leave, he looked at the empty office, at the desk where he had almost quit, and smiled. He hadn't failed today. He had fought back. The next morning, James walked into the office without dread. There were no trumpets, no applause, just the steady rhythm of keyboards clicking and the faint buzz of fluorescent lights. But something was different. And it wasn't just him. It was the way people looked at him now. Sarah from marketing paused on her way to the break room. "Hey, I saw your email last night. Impressive work. Seriously." Even Mark, the guy who had humiliated him in the meeting, gave a short nod in passing. Not an apology, but acknowledgement. That meant more. James didn't respond with fanfare. He just smiled and got to work. Day by day, things began to shift. Not because he was trying to prove anything anymore, but because he had stopped waiting for permission to act like the man he wanted to be. The quote in his wallet had become more than words. It was a standard. A quiet reminder he carried with him, not just on paper, but in posture, tone, and decision. He started asking better questions during meetings, volunteering for tasks others passed over. He reviewed other team members' reports before submission, not to show off, but to help them avoid the mistakes he knew too well. And people noticed. His manager pulled him aside one afternoon. "I've been meaning to talk to you," she said. "You've stepped up. The pitch revisions, your attention to detail, your leadership on the Tanaka account. It's all been next level. What changed?" James didn't need to think. He simply said, "I remembered who I was." She smiled. "Well, whoever that guy is, we want more of him." A week later, he got an unexpected call from the director of operations. They wanted him to co-lead a new initiative, something that would have seemed impossible just a month ago. That night, As James sat alone on his balcony, city lights flickering beneath the dusk sky, he pulled the napkin out again. He'd read it hundreds of times now, but tonight it felt different. Not because it was magic, because it worked. The truth it carried was like a compass, simple, unglamorous, and quietly powerful. He thought about the old man in the diner. Who was he? Why had he given James that message at just the right time? James didn't know. Maybe he never would. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that it had saved him from himself, not in a flash of glory, but in 1,000 small, consistent battles, day after day. The most surprising thing wasn't that others believed in him again. It was that he did. And that was the beginning of everything. The rain returned on a Thursday. Not the kind that raged and howled, but the quiet kind. The kind that whispered against the windows and made the world feel slow. James watched it fall from his office window, a coffee in hand, his desk spotless, his inbox empty. He had just wrapped a presentation that earned a rare round of spontaneous applause, not because it was flashy, but because it was solid, honest, and sharp, the kind of work he used to think was out of reach. He was no longer the man who second-guessed everything. He had scars now, but also strength, not because life got easier, but because he stopped waiting to feel ready. As he packed his bag to head home, he heard a familiar sound. Silence behind him, the awkward, hesitant kind. He turned to see Kyle, the new intern, bright kid, always early, but lately quieter, thinner around the eyes, like sleep hadn't been a loyal companion. "Hey," James said, tossing his bag over his shoulder. "You good?" Kyle hesitated, then said, "Yeah, just a lot going on. Learning curve, I guess." James tilted his head. He knew that look, that weight. Kyle stared down at the floor, then said it under his breath. "I don't think I'm cut out for this." The words hit James harder than he expected. He reached into his wallet, paused, and then slowly pulled out the napkin. It was worn now, creased and faded, but still legible. He handed it to Kyle. "What's this?" James smiled. "Someone gave it to me once, when I needed it most." Kyle read the words silently. "You already have what it takes. You just forgot who you are." He looked up, confused. "But how do you know it's true?" James leaned against the doorframe. "Because I was sitting where you are. Tired. Lost. Ready to give up. And this reminded me that I wasn't broken. Just buried." Kyle didn't say anything at first, just stared at the napkin like it was a lifeline. "Keep it," James said. "And remember, it's not about never falling. It's about refusing to stay down." That night, James walked through the rain with no umbrella, letting it soak through his shirt. He didn't mind. He thought about the old man in the diner, how a single sentence scribbled on a napkin changed the course of his life. And now maybe it would do the same for someone else. Not because of magic, because of truth passed hand to hand, from one soul to another. And that's how change spreads, quietly, powerfully, one broken soul at a time.